I'm a 28-year-old man who grew up in a family where favoritism was the norm. My parents, especially my father, always favored my younger sister, Amy, who's now 25. This favoritism was apparent from a young age and only intensified as we grew up. It's a long and painful history that recently culminated in a shocking inheritance dispute. From my earliest memories, Amy was the golden child. When she turned 2 and I was 5, our parents threw her a lavish birthday party with a bouncy castle, a petting zoo, and professional face painters. My birthday that year was a small family dinner with a store-bought cake. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. Amy always got the best toys, clothes, and most importantly, attention. One incident stands out in my memory. When I was 10, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a new bike. Amy, seeing the bike, threw a tantrum because she wanted one too. Instead of teaching her about saving or patience, my parents immediately went out and bought her a better bike than mine. This was a common occurrence. School was no different. My parents attended all of Amy's school events, but often missed mine. In 4th grade, I had the lead role in a school play and had practiced for weeks. On the night of the performance, my parents showed up an hour late, missing my big scene. They claimed Amy had a tummy ache and needed comforting, but I later learned they had simply lost track of time while playing with her. No matter how hard I worked, my achievements were never good enough. I consistently got straight A's, joined the math club, and won a regional science fair in middle school, but my parents barely acknowledged these accomplishments. Yet, when Amy got a B+ on a single test, they threw her a celebratory dinner and bought her a new phone as motivation. High school was particularly tough. I threw myself into every activity I could, hoping to win their approval. I was captain of the debate team, editor of the school newspaper, and maintained a 4.0 GPA. Meanwhile, Amy coasted through school, barely maintaining a C average, and spent most of her time partying with friends. My junior year, I was selected as one of 2 students from our school to attend a prestigious summer program at Harvard. It was a huge honor, and I was thrilled. When I shared the news at dinner, my dad grunted and changed the subject to Amy's upcoming dance recital. My mom said, "That's nice," but quickly moved on. The night of Amy's recital, which fell on the same day I was leaving for Harvard, my parents couldn't drive me to the airport because they didn't want to miss her performance. I had to ask a friend's parents for a ride. The college application process was another painful experience. I spent months perfecting my essays, participating in extracurriculars, and studying for the SATs. I was accepted into several top-tier universities and received a substantial scholarship to my dream school. When I announced this at dinner, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. My dad said, "That's good, but don't let it go to your head. College isn't everything." My mom added, "Just don't forget about us when you're off becoming a big shot." In contrast, when Amy barely graduated high school and decided not to go to college, my parents were completely supportive. They praised her for knowing herself and not conforming to societal pressures. They even bought her a car as a graduation present, something they never did for me. This constant favoritism took a heavy toll on me emotionally. I struggled with depression and anxiety throughout my teens and early 20s. I started seeing a therapist in college, which helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't my fault. It took years of work to build my self-esteem and learn to validate myself instead of seeking approval from my parents. Despite the lack of support from my immediate family, I managed to build a good life for myself. I graduated college with honors, secured a good job in finance, and bought my own house by the time I was 27. I'm proud of what I've achieved, even if my parents aren't. Now, here's where the current drama starts. My grandfather on my dad's side recently passed away. He was a successful businessman who built a fortune from scratch, and he left behind a significant estate. In his will, he divided his assets equally among his children, my dad, and his siblings and grandchildren, including me, Amy, and our cousins. My share of the inheritance was substantial, about $500,000. It would have allowed me to pay off my student loans, invest in my future, and maybe even start my own business someday. I was grateful for this unexpected windfall and the opportunities it could provide. However, when the will was read, my parents were visibly upset. They pulled me aside afterward and told me they thought it was unfair that I got an equal share. They said Amy needed the money more because she was struggling. She works part-time at a coffee shop and lives in our parents' basement. I was shocked, but tried to stay calm. I explained that this was Grandpa's decision, and it wasn't up to them to change it. They insisted that I should do the right thing and give my share to Amy. When I refused, they got angry and started guilt-tripping me, saying I was selfish and ungrateful. My dad brought up every instance he could think of where they had supported me paying for my braces, buying me school supplies, and letting me live at home during college, even though I worked part-time to contribute to expenses. He conveniently forgot about the car they bought Amy, the countless shopping sprees, and the fact that they're still supporting her at 25. The situation escalated quickly. My dad, as the executor of the will, decided to take matters into his own hands. He announced that he was going to reinterpret Grandpa's wishes and give my entire share to Amy, on top of her own inheritance. He claimed this is what Grandpa would have wanted if he had known our individual circumstances. I was devastated. Not only was this clearly illegal, but it was also a painful reminder of how little my parents valued me. I tried to reason with them, pointing out that Grandpa had always treated all his grandchildren equally, and that he was well aware of our situations. My mom then accused me of speaking ill of the dead by suggesting Grandpa would have wanted anything different from what my dad was proposing. I brought up specific memories of Grandpa encouraging my academic and career pursuits, but my parents dismissed these as misunderstandings. They claimed Grandpa had privately expressed concern about Amy's future and had wanted to ensure she was taken care of. When I asked why he hadn't just written the will that way, they didn't have an answer. Amy, for her part, seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but didn't speak up against our parents. When I tried to talk to her privately, she just shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." It was clear she wasn't going to be any help. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I reached out to my paternal grandmother, Grandpa's widow, for advice. She was furious when she heard what was happening. She told me that this was absolutely not what Grandpa had intended, and that my parents had no right to change the will. Grandma shared some information that shed new light on the situation. Apparently, my parents had approached Grandpa a few years ago, asking him to leave everything to Amy in his will. Grandpa had firmly refused, stating that he believed in treating all his grandchildren equally. He had even added a clause to his will stating that anyone who contested the equal distribution would forfeit their share. Armed with this information, I confronted my parents. They were shocked that Grandma had told me about their previous attempt to influence the will. My dad tried to justify it by saying they were just looking out for Amy's future, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandma took action immediately. She contacted her lawyer and the other executors of the will. She also reached out to my dad's siblings, who were equally outraged by what my dad was trying to do. Together, they put a stop to my dad's plan and ensured that the will would be executed as written. My parents were forced to back down, but they were furious with me. They accused me of turning the family against them and said I should have handled this in-house instead of involving others. My mom cried about how I had betrayed them and broken the family apart. My dad threatened to cut me out of their will entirely, to which I responded that I had never expected anything from them anyway. They're now threatening to cut me off completely if I accept the money, as they see it. My dad even went so far as to say that if I take the inheritance, I'm no longer welcome in their home. My mom, in a particularly low blow, said that my acceptance of the money shows that I never really loved them and was just waiting to cash in on their deaths. The extended family is divided on the issue. Some of my cousins are supportive, recognizing the long-standing favoritism and praising me for standing up for myself. Others think I should have just given in to keep the peace, saying that family harmony is more important than money. My dad's siblings are firmly on my side, but this has caused tension between them and my parents. Amy is caught in the middle of all this. She told me privately that she didn't ask for this and feels guilty, but she's not willing to stand up to our parents. I don't blame her entirely. She's been conditioned her whole life to rely on them, and I can't expect her to break free overnight. However, it's frustrating that she's not taking responsibility for her own life, and is letting our parents manipulate her so easily. As for me, I've had to make some difficult decisions in the past few weeks. I've decided to go ahead and accept my inheritance, despite my parents' threats. This money will allow me to secure my financial future and pursue opportunities that I've worked hard for. It's not about the money itself, it's about finally standing up for myself and refusing to be treated as less than. I've spent too many years trying to win my parents' approval, and I've realized that I'll never get it, no matter what I do. It's time for me to focus on my own happiness and well-being. The fallout from this decision has been intense. My parents have cut off all contact with me, and my mom sent me a long, emotional email accusing me of tearing the family apart and being ungrateful for everything they've done for me. She listed every little thing they ever bought me or did for me growing up, as if that somehow justifies their favoritism toward Amy. My dad hasn't spoken to me since our last confrontation, and I doubt he will anytime soon. I'm not going to lie, this has been incredibly painful. It's hard to come to terms with the fact that my parents care more about maintaining their distorted sense of fairness than about our relationship. I've had moments of doubt where I've wondered if I should have just given in to keep the peace, but deep down, I know that would have been a mistake. Giving in would have meant continuing the cycle of favoritism and letting my parents control my life. I'm tired of being the unseen son, always in Amy's shadow. It's time for me to step into the light, even if it means walking away from my parents. As I move forward, I'm focusing on building a life that's fulfilling and meaningful to me. I've reconnected with some old friends and have started volunteering with a local youth mentorship program. Helping young people who are struggling with self-esteem and family issues has been incredibly rewarding, and it's reminded me of how far I've come. I've also started seeing my therapist again to work through the complicated emotions surrounding my family. It's not easy, but I'm determined to heal and grow from this experience. My relationship with Amy remains strained, but I'm trying to be patient. I've encouraged her to seek therapy and to start thinking about her future independent of our parents. I don't know if she'll take that advice, but I hope she does. I love her, despite everything, and I want to see her thrive. But I've also made it clear that I won't be her safety net if she continues to let our parents dictate her life. She needs to learn to stand on her own, just as I've had to. In the end, this whole ordeal has taught me a lot about myself and about the kind of person I want to be. I've learned that standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when it means going against the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. But I've also learned that you can't spend your life trying to please others at the expense of your own happiness. Sometimes, you have to make tough choices and walk away from toxic situations, even if it means losing people you thought would always be there. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents or with Amy, but I do know that I'm no longer going to be the unseen son. I'm going to live my life on my own terms, and I'm going to be proud of the person I've become. No amount of favoritism or manipulation can take that away from me. It's been a long and difficult journey, but I'm finally ready to embrace my own worth and move forward with confidence. And that, I think, is the best inheritance I could ever receive.